On December 22nd, 2025, a Twitter user posted a 30-second video that exposed one of the most embarrassing government failures in recent history. He didn't hack anything, he didn't use special software, he just simply copied and pasted. The US Department of Justice had just released hundreds of thousands of pages about Jeffrey Epstein's crimes, as we all know. Pages that were supposed to protect victims' identities, pages that were supposed to hide the names of the co-conspirators. But as we all know now, the redactions didn't actually work out in their favor. To understand how spectacularly this failed, we need to go back to mid-November. November 18th, 2025, the House Representatives vote 427-1 to pass the Epstein Files Transparency Act. So, the next day rolls around and the Senate passes it by with unanimous consent. President Trump signs it into law the same day. The law is simple. 30 days to release all of the unclassified documents here, with narrow exceptions for the victim privacy and of course the active investigations going on related to Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. December 19th arrives, the DOJ publishes what they call several 100,000 pages to a dedicated website called the Epstein Library. From what we know, at least 550 pages are completely blacked out, as we can see here. One document, a 119-page New York grand jury file, is entirely redacted. So I'm sure, as you already know, the backlash was pretty bad and immediate after they dropped this. Critics accused the DOJ of defying the law's intent. The next day, December 20th, they release a largely unredacted version of that grand jury document. But honestly, it's already way too late. December 22nd, Ed Krasenstein posts a video demonstration. I simply highlighted the text, copied it, and pasted it in a document. Within hours, it goes viral. His brother Brian tweets, Trump's DOJ is so incompetent that they don't even know how to properly redact PDFs. By December 23rd, a user named Liam Nissan reaches 6.8 million views, explaining the copy-paste method. And as well as that, TikTok got to work, as well as that, actually found a new method as well, adjusting image brightness to see through scanned redactions. Which, wow. The question everyone asking is, how did this happen? But in the world, there were already security experts who actually already had a name for this because it happened so much. They call it the black highlighter error. PDFs aren't simple image files. They're structured containers made up of multiple layers, fonts, and embedded data streams. The black highlighter error happens when someone places a black rectangle over text instead of removing the text from the file's data structure. I mean, imagine it like this, right? The text is still there, but it's just being covered by a black tape or a rectangle. Just like if you went into Photoshop and did it. Not what we expect from actual redactions coming from a government, I'm sure, as you know. Proper redaction actually requires deleting said text, not just hiding it, actually removing it permanently. So here's what makes this inexcusable. The NSA actually published a guide on this back in 2005, which demonstrated the vulnerability of this exact case, which was over 20 years ago now for reference. Quote, information hidden or covered in a computer document can almost always be recovered. Covering text with black rectangles is not effective for computer documents. So as we can see from the documents, this was most certainly not a new mistake. It's happened before and it will most certainly happen again, I'd say. Not from the government necessarily, there'll definitely be companies which do this and get it wrong. In 2019, Paul Manafort's lawyers made the exact same error. Black highlighter, copy-paste vulnerability. They accidentally exposed that Manafort shared Trump campaign polling data with Konstantin Klimnik, a Russian intelligence officer. Judge Herbert B. Dixon Jr. wrote multiple columns documenting these failures. His conclusion, they're as certain as death and taxes. So when the most desired document in recent history finally released, you can guess what happened. So on December 25th, 2025, the same preventable error happened again. But here's where it gets more complicated. So, as you may or may not know actually, the DOJ didn't make most of the mistakes here. No, the CNN investigated the most widely shared redaction failure. What they found was unexpected here. The flawed document did not originate within the Department of Justice at all. It came from the Virgin Islands Attorney General's office. Here's the chain of custody. February 2021, the USVI Attorney General filed an amended civil lawsuit against Epstein's estate with improperly redacted passages, which here it was published to a public court docket. March 2022, the flawed document gets attached as an exhibit in a related civil case. December 2025, the Department of Justice republishes the entire Virgin Islands case docket to the Epstein Library. From what we can see, the DOJ never actually re-verified the redactions. When people managed to get past the black highlighter, which to be honest was pretty easy, using Acrobat, the TikTok method, you name it, so what exactly were they hiding here? That's the big question we're all probably thinking. I know I am as well. Well, when people started copying and pasting text from underneath these black boxes, the financial web emerged. So one of the revelations that people managed to find in these unredactions was Cypress Inc., which is a company that owned Epstein's New Mexico ranch, which reported $18,000 in cash while paying $106,000 in property taxes. For 6 years, 2011 to 2016, it never reported the New Mexico property in its total assets to the government. JSC Interiors LLC, which was registered with a trafficking victim listed as the sole owner. Richard Kahn controlled this. The bank account was seemingly funded entirely from Epstein's personal accounts as well. This is one of the revelations not many people have talked about, but I think is quite interesting. Putting a victim on the front of the company, it seems almost unbelievable. Under the black boxes as well, something we noticed was this. Epstein instructed witnesses to destroy evidence relevant to ongoing court proceedings, which most people saw here that the enterprise paid large sums to participant witnesses, including covering their legal fees as well. From 2011 to 2019 here, Richard Kahn received over 10 million net from Epstein and other Epstein-owned entities. The tax forms provided here are by those entities who did not report nearly the full compensation. But the failures weren't limited to simply copy and paste here. At least one survivor had her real name exposed across multiple documents. She even said, "It haunts me to my core." All of this sitting underneath black bars, accessible to anyone with copy and paste. It didn't work out, as we know. This reveals something very interesting here. As we can see in the latest dump by the DOJ, some documents in the release were properly redacted, others weren't. So, look at the FBI's FOIA releases. Flight logs, prison records, you name it. All properly redacted with legal exemption codes. The codes you see, like B7C, cite specific legal justifications. B7C protects personal privacy in law enforcement records. Now here you might be asking all about the court documents, but you might be surprised to know actually that the court documents here had no FOIA codes. There were no legal exemption labels visible on the redactions themselves either, but actually just the black rectangles as we saw before. So now you might be asking why the difference here? Well, apparently here it's about the process. FOIA released documents to go through these established protocols developed over the decades. Each federal agency had dedicated FOI officers, trained professionals, standardized exemptions with specific legal goals. These documents were handled by people who do this every day. The Customs flight logs, the Federal Bureau of Prisons records, the FBI case files, all properly redacted with legal justification codes. Court documents under the Transparency Act, well, as I mentioned earlier, they only had 30 days, and this was a brand new process for them. So you can imagine the challenges they were up against here, which kind of plays into the point of a lot of people saying it was inevitable that there were going to be mistakes in this amount of files, with the amount of people going through them, and many other people saying that there was no way they could have covered everything in time. The DOJ deployed 200 attorneys, 187 national security lawyers for initial review, and another 25 plus specifically for victim information protection. Hundreds of thousands of pages with 30 days? Well, with that amount of work, you can only expect what actually happened here. Well, the former federal prosecutor Sari Krisoff told the CNN, "It is a hard job to redact these documents appropriately, but the DOJ has thousands of lawyers, top lawyers especially, who could be working on these said documents." The result, both over redaction and under redaction in the same release. Entire pages blacked out with no explanation, and victim names appearing unredacted. From what I can see, at least a minimum of one survivor had her name unredacted, and the fault of this ended up with her being called up and harassed. Which begs the question of, I wonder actually how many people out there have their names unredacted now, or might have their names unredacted in the near future with these current methods to unredact these pages. Then, there's the July 2019 FBI emails referencing 10 co-conspirators. 10 people beyond Ghislaine Maxwell being actively investigated. Only 3 names are visible: Ghislaine Maxwell, Leslie Wexner, Jean-Luc Brunel. And currently on this list, 7 of these names are still redacted, and yet to be uncovered by the public and people trying to use the methods again. Only Maxwell was ever charged. But here's where it gets worse. Well, in September 2025, Kash Patel, Trump's nominee here for the FBI director, was directly asked about Epstein's co-conspirators here. Here's what he said. No credible information? Well, if you didn't know, the FBI's own email actually referenced 10 co-conspirators. Subpoenas being served, 25 victim interviews scheduled. The man nominated to lead the FBI claimed there was no credible evidence. The FBI's own documents tell a different story. Meanwhile, Jennifer Freeman, attorney for Maria Farmer, revealed how big the mistake actually was made here. Quote, by the government's admission, over 1,000 victims suffered from Epstein and Maxwell's actions. Over 1,000 victims. 2 arrests. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, we're working around the clock. Attorney General Pam Bondi told Fox News shortly after taking office that Epstein's client list was sitting on my desk right now. The official response here had actually seemed quite defensive, but we had a memo from the DOJ in July saying there was no incriminating client list to be found. White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles told CBS that Bondi had whiffed the handling. From what we can see here, more than a dozen of the survivors issued a joint statement together. They accused DOJ of violating the law by releasing only a fraction of the files and ending up failing to redact survivor identities across the documents here and ending up actually causing real-world problems and panic for all the victims, which honestly here failure is inexcusable. 12 senators, 11 Democrats, and Republican Lisa Murkowski requested a DOJ Inspector General audit examining whether redactions properly protected survivors, whether they shielded abusers, or whether politics influenced the release here. The House Oversight Committee launched its own investigation, however. Representatives are exploring contempt of Congress charges. But overall, it's a back and forth blame game, but each side is saying different things at the moment. We'll have to see in the near future what happens with it. Overall, this isn't a Trump DOJ problem or a Biden DOJ problem. The 2008 non-prosecution agreement happened under President Bush. Attorney General was Michael Mukasey. US Attorney Alexander Acosta cut the deal. Investigation failures continued under Obama's Justice Department. Trump's first term, Biden's term, now Trump's second term, 4 presidents and 8 attorneys general. Decades of warnings. The system seemingly failed every single time. The Epstein redaction failures weren't technical mistakes, or they didn't seem so. So overall, the NSA actually documented this vulnerability back in 2005, as we know. Well, now 20 years later, the exact same failure exposed the victim names throughout many of the Epstein documents here, while also heavily hiding the co-conspirator identities we saw in one of the most inspected and analyzed document releases in the recent years now. But in the end, as we can see, this wasn't really a glitch. This was seemingly a choice made by them. A choice to use visual masking instead of actual data removal, as many people suggested, including the NSA. A choice to prioritize speed over security here, which is a choice that took over 20 seconds to exploit with copy and paste. And honestly, if TikTok debunked it in like a day, then yeah, we know it must have not been very effective. The redaction method failed here because it was never designed to actually succeed, and until someone is held accountable for ignoring 2 decades of warnings, it will fail again. And well, as we know, the files are public, the methods are currently documented, the pattern is clear. We're gonna have to see what else comes out of these files and what other people are going to be able to find as well.